Thank you very much, fellow Africans, and welcome to today's episode of the Change for African campaign. So, fellow Africans, being on Wednesday, it's all about our third pillar of the Change for African campaign. So, fellow Africans, to help us exemplify or illustrate our 93rd episode of the Change for African campaign will be the SDG target 9.4. Remember, the goal itself, number 9 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, is all about industry, innovation, and infrastructure. But then today, to help us exemplify on the third episode will be SDG target 9.4, that is all about to upgrade industries and infrastructure for sustainable and clean technology by 2030. So this is a key target of a goal of the United Nations Sustainable Goal number 9. So this being already third episode and around the areas of resources, we just have a lot of controversies when it comes to the African resources, if whether it is substantial, whether it has the quality. There's a lot of controversies about that. But then we also need to make sure that even with all that controversy, then what we are having currently, what are we using it, like how are we being able to utilize what we have currently as an African continent in terms of resources to enable us to be able to do the industrialization that we need. Because remember, these resources are the ones to help us industrialize. So that is why we speak about the resources being a very critical thing. These are mineral, these are raw materials that we need to be able to do the industrialization that will align with the goal itself and being able to have implemented the goal itself. Remember, we are speaking this in the African context, though this is a United Nations thing, meaning it's a global thing. But then we are Africans, and Africa is our business, so we speak for Africa first. We need to first make Africa. Remember, the African countries, the 54 of them, the only thing that separates us and the artificial boundary. But then we are one people, we are common people that need to speak with the same voice, and we are facing the same problem, so we develop the same intention towards curbing that problem. So fellow Africans, one of the very things you need to be very sure about is that industrial growth is needed, but it must be green. That is why we're speaking about upgrading industries and infrastructure for sustainability and clean technology. So meaning it must be green. Speaking about green, we speak about, like, even if we are doing industrialization, then the means of energy or the type of energy we're using, we have to embrace the clean sources of energy. These are renewable sources of energy, so that would not also be another problem, or do not create a problem when it comes to the climate change. Remember, the global warming is there alive and well, so we need to figure out how are we going to do this. So even though we have the resources, then we need to make sure, even if you're using these resources to now go into industrialization of Africa, but then we need to be very, very, we need to be very expeditious, on how we are going to implement this. But then, because it is necessary for us to do that, because we will not continue forever to import things from other continents. So it's the kind of energy you're using to do industrialization or the industrial growth that we want as Africa, it must be green, using clean energy, whereby there's low emissions of tech. And so it's also need to be efficient, less waste and smarter processes. We need to modernize this thing. They need to be contemporary of things that we're doing, so that we catch up with the world, because we know that the other world is way in front of leaving Africa behind. So we need to see how are we going to be able to make sure that we are able to match with those people. And matching with them, it calls for very prudent management of these resources of we Africans, because nobody is coming to manage them for us. Instead, they're coming to exploit the resources that we have and take them to their continents. So Africa's challenge when it comes to this is whereby much of the continent still relies on old polluting technologies, and inefficient infrastructure. Without upgrading, Africa risks locking unsustainable systems, because you realize that though we may have some sort of industrialization, we are yet to industrialize as a continent. But then, though we may have some, but then we are still many of these are still depend on the old ways, whereby these are systems and these are kind of the kind of energy you're using to industrialize is still not up to standard. But remember, the goal or the key target is all about that it should be sustainable. Sustainable means you also need to make sure that though we are going to industrialize, we do not interfere with the other systems, do not interfere with the ecosystem in terms of the climate change and the global warming, because these are issues that are alive and well, that if we industrialize that and don't look at this, we are still digging a hole that will not be able to get out of that hole. So it is incumbent upon us to make sure that yes, we must industrialize as Africa. There is not an alternative there if you really want to grow, but then how are we doing this? It must be sustainable. So Africa is just we have a lot. We have the resources. Though there is a lot of controversy around the resources, we need to make sure that what we have as an African continent, we are putting it into consideration in terms of how are we going to utilize it so that we can have the real industrialization as a continent, in making sure that our resources are well utilized, or they're used expeditiously or efficiently, to be able to make sure that we have an industrialized Africa. Industrialization, we need to make sure we have the right energy in place, that is the renewable energy or the clean energy in place, or the green energy in place. We need to make sure that people embrace change, because when it comes to industrialization, it means now we are creating jobs for people. Because remember, Africa, we have so many young people who lack jobs, because our status of industries is yet to be advanced as it's supposed to be. So we have a lot of that is actually a job opportunity, for all the employment opportunity for the unemployed youth of Africa, because we have a very strong workforce. So when it comes to innovation itself, as the goal says about innovation, African youth need to merge, come together, make sure that we are participating in the innovative ways of making sure that we innovate and make Africa, a tech-free, continent, because we have the ability to do that. So fellow Africans, allow me to end at that point. This being our 93rd episode, let's meet tomorrow to discuss about our 94th episode of the Change for African campaign. And we are remaining with only 7 episodes to say, as we are going to end the daily episodes of the Change for African campaign. Thank you and have a great time. Thank you.